Hello, ladies. I hope that your day is going well. If you have not already subscribed, please subscribe, like the video, and hit the notification bell so you'll be notified every time that I upload a new video. In this video, I want to talk about 4 signs of a problematic relationship and how to avoid getting caught in that matrix. So the 4 signs are compromising, settling, overriding red flags, and excuse making. So when we become involved, embroiled, entangled in a relationship that is going to be problematic or dysfunctional or unfortunately toxic, there are certain characteristics that are very common. There is a common theme that is present. And this is why it's so important that we are really taking our time, that we are vetting, that we are not being rushed via love bombing into a relationship without performing our due diligence. Due diligence, screening, vetting is something that takes place in all facets of life. And it's very important for us not to be discouraged from doing the vetting and screening process because ultimately it can have very dire and harsh consequences if we do not engage in the screening and the vetting. There is a reason that you are screened when you are looking to become employed at various employers in different niches and different fields where you're going to be screened. Where you're going to be screened if you are applying for a car loan or a home loan or even looking to rent a home or rent a townhome or an apartment. There is screening that is done before you can enter the military. Many facets of our life, screening takes place, and it's for a reason because it is to determine whether someone is a good match for that particular endeavor, for that particular organization, for that particular company, wanting to make sure that there is not discordance or problems based upon bringing someone on board or extending a loan, etc. So very important when we're talking about interpersonal romantic relationships that we are doing that screening so that we can really take our time to determine, is this person really a good match for us? Because someone initially can appear to be a good match. As a woman, we can meet a man and he may have the characteristics from what we can see superficially that he may be a good match for us. But as time goes by, what we can ascertain and what we can determine is that actually that is all very surface. It's superficial, that we are actually meeting a representative, or there is a lot of baggage or problems that do not make him a good match, do not make him a man that we should be aligning with romantically. It's 2 very different things to be perhaps a friend to someone versus embarking in a romantic relationship. And the stakes are very high. And that's why it's so very important before we even go down that road that we make sure we're using our wisdom, our discernment. And is this a man that God would want us to be aligned with romantically? So some common themes that come up when a relationship is one that we are embarking upon that is going to be problematic and where we are going down a path that is already going to be a detour. The first thing is compromising. So we may have had a standard, a boundary in place that now we are acquiescing to less than. We are abdicating this standard, this boundary, and we're saying, okay, although I am going to compromise. And it's not a little thing. It's a big thing. It's a huge thing. So perhaps something where we are not looking to be in a relationship with someone who is not financially stable. And we decide to go ahead and compromise that. And then what happens is that as we're engaging in this relationship, we see that all of that instability can then bleed over into the romantic relationship. And we are now being asked for loans. We are asked to pay the bills of of his that are his, we are being asked to co-sign various things. And this is a non-marital relationship. So this is just dating. So we're compromising. And so that should always be a red flag to us when we see that we've previously had a standard, a boundary in place, a criteria, and that we are now throwing that to the side, that we are discarding this boundary, we are compromising on it. That is a sign that we are embarking on the wrong path, because those boundaries and standards are there for a reason, to protect us. The second scenario is when we settle, when we know that we have certain expectations for a romantic relationship and we find that we are settling. So now we are saying, this is what I want in a relationship, but I guess I'll go ahead and accept this. When we know that that's not really what we desire, this is not how we want to be engaged in a relationship. But we end up settling because we are going against the standard that we already had in place, and we are choosing less than what is the previous standard, because either our self-worth has been compromised, our value, we're not really recognizing our value, and we're willing to override what we previously had in terms of our expectations in a relationship, which can bring us needless heartache, stress, problems because of the fact that we did not stand our ground and stand firm. The third scenario is overriding red flags. So there may be various red flags that come up where in our spirit we know that something isn't quite right, where we know that something doesn't add up. Either it's something where, let's say, this man has presented one scenario and it is not proven to be correct. So he has not told us the truth. He has been evasive about something, and then we find out something that is troubling. He has told us, or he has rather not told us. So he has not divulged important information. He has not divulged really important information. So for an example, there may be a scenario, and this has played out with different women, where a man says that he is not married, and then come to find out that he is actually married, but he's separated. So that is a huge deal. That's a big deal because he's not in a position to be dating because he's still married. So when we override these red flags, that is again putting us in a precarious situation where we can become involved in a relationship that is ultimately going to be burdensome, problematic, versus beneficial to us, which is why, again, it underscores the importance of taking our time, performing our due diligence, doing the screening, doing the vetting, because a relationship that's a quality relationship, you don't have to rush, and you shouldn't be rushed into the relationship. That speaks volumes if you're being rushed into a relationship without being able to take that very important time to get to determine if this person is compatible and if their ideals and character and values really line up. It's important to know, as a woman, does a man's character, integrity, values, ethics, what he holds dear, are those things in alignment with ours? And that is something that we will not know automatically. And it's not always going to be determined by what someone says. It will be determined by their action. And time is a great revealer. Time is very revelatory. But that is why it's important that if we encounter red flags, that we not let any sort of love bombing and rushing into relationship get us to override those red flags, because it's far better to avoid getting involved in a relationship that's going to be problematic and discordant in our life. Far better to not get involved, but to rather take our time so that we can see and we can determine and evaluate that this actually is not going to be a good match. Excuse making, number 4, is something that can happen when we're on and we are doing the compromising, settling, overriding red flags, and we also can be making excuses for why it should be okay to engage in the relationship, why we should move forward even though we know that there are obvious reasons that this is not going to be a good idea, but we find ourselves making excuses for these red flags that we've seen, and we are minimizing them. We're either minimizing them, pretending they don't exist. And so this can be very detrimental to us because, in terms of our standards, our criteria, our boundaries, those are very important because what they can do is help ensure that our life does not go off the rails by becoming involved in a relationship that's problematic and detrimental and perhaps dysfunctional. So, by us keeping those firm boundaries and standards and not making any excuses when we see the red flags occur, we can help to avoid engaging in a relationship that really should not have passed go. And that's why the discernment, that's why the wisdom, it's so really important for us to be listening to God and seeing what guidance He's giving us. And when He is showing us that something is not for us, that we believe Him and we really trust and understand it, because there's some things we may not see immediately, but that there is an issue ahead. So it's like the Titanic, there's an iceberg out there. So it's very important that when we see that iceberg, that we not try to continue on with business as usual with the status quo, that we recognize and that we not excuse things that we see that are discordant and that don't line up and that don't add up and that are not going to be in accordance with our values, with our standards, with our ethics, with our expectations. Very, very important. So, in knowing our worth, knowing our value, knowing what our expectations are in a relationship, if we have a firm understanding of who we are, if we know that we are loved, if we know that we are worthy of a healthy, functional relationship, and that we can be happily single, if a relationship does not meet those standards, then we can be in a place of wellness and at peace and not being rushed into something that will ultimately be problematic and not in our best interest. Let me know what you think in the comments beneath the video. As always, be blessed, continue to level up, be mindful of these 4 scenarios of problematic relationships because you deserve better.